This episode is brought to you by STAR, a Frost & Sullivan Executive Mind Exchange event for sales leaders on February 11th through the 13th, 2019 in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. Register for the event at frost.com/Vengreso.
I've heard you talk quite a bit about mindset, skill sets, tool sets. So they're just much more encompassing than just building skills. So the 5 that rise above all the rest: a modern seller is agile. A modern seller is entrepreneurial. They are holistic. They are social, and they are an ambassador.
Hey y'all, welcome to Selling with Social, the podcast that helps marketers increase marketing qualified leads, sales reps to shatter sales results, and sales leaders to grow as leaders. Each show, we interview sales, marketing, and social media practitioners, leaders, and influencers to help you connect, close more deals, build stronger relationships with clients, and improve your sales productivity. I'm Mario Martinez Jr. You're now listening to Selling with Social. Amy Franko, welcome to Selling with Social. I'm super excited, my friend, to have you with me.
Okay, that might be the best Amy Franko I've ever heard. I'm going to be borrowing that. Mario Martinez.
You almost thought you were entering into a boxing round.
Well, I'm super excited to be here too. So glad to be here and part of this conversation today.
Well, I'm so glad. It's been a long time coming. And I'm even more excited, Amy, because you're here on Selling with Social and all of our listeners are listening in. And you are about to launch, by the time this is published, you would have launched a brand new book.
Yep.
And the title is near and dear to my heart. Not only is it near and dear to my heart, I feel like you plagiarized it and stole it from me.
Well, let's see. I made sure I checked everything.
I'm just kidding. You did a fantastic job because the title is exactly what I want to be talking about today. And welcome to the show, everyone. Amy Franko. She is the founder and CEO of Impact Instruction Group and now author of The Modern Seller. And as you all know that are listening in, we talk about at Vengreso, the modern buyer requires a modern seller. We talk about that the modern buyer has become faster at buying than sellers have become at selling. And so when I found out that Amy was publishing the Modern Seller book, I said, Amy, you have got to be on my podcast. And after many moons of trying to get her very busy schedule, she's here with us. So Amy, do me a favor, tell everybody, who is Amy Franko?
Oh, well, again, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. So, just to fill in a couple of blanks for all of our listeners, a little bit about me. The first 10 years of my career was really dedicated to being a quota carrying sales rep. I worked for IBM and for Lenovo. And I worked in their personal computing division and was on quota. So that was the first 10 years of my career. Then I decided to take a 180-degree pivot, launching into entrepreneurship, and started Impact Instruction Group in 2007. So it has been an adventure since then, and the business has evolved, taken on some different twists and turns. Today, it is a sales training, sales consulting firm, and also a keynote speaking. So those are my big passions around everything sales and everything sales leadership. So that's a little bit about me and where I'm at today.
So you were born and raised in sales.
Kind of.
Yeah. And then you went out, and people don't really think about this when they say, I went out to be an entrepreneur, right? Some people think, oh, that's because you couldn't succeed in selling. And that's what some people have said about me when I left the VP of sales role. But here's what I'll tell you. And Amy and I are on the same page on this one, because when you can go and open up your own consulting business, in this case, a training and consulting business, which is what you have and what we have, and you work off 100% off of commissions, meaning you're killing your own deals, you're slaying your own deals, and you're delivering, you are the bizom, if I can say so myself. Yeah, a resident expert on selling, but do me a favor, and I've got to know this. before we get into this, the modern seller, I need to know something juicy. You got to give it to me, something juicy, something that nobody would know about you by looking at any of your social profiles.
See, this is kind of a tough question to answer. So I don't know how juicy this is, but I'm going to tell you, and you can ask me a bunch of questions about it. Most people don't know about me that I am the oldest of 5 daughters. I have 4 younger sisters. And so that means I have kind of been the boss lady since day one.
So you grew up being a leader.
Yeah. See, my sisters call it bossy. I call it leadership.
Yeah. Sheryl Sandberg, actually, I saw her speaking at Dreamforce, and she was talking about that, they talk about little girls on the playground and they're being too bossy. They're telling everybody what to do. And Sheryl said, but wait a minute, are they really being too bossy, or are they really displaying great qualities of a leader?
See, I agree with Sheryl.
There you go. Yeah. So, but I'm going to say it came from Amy Franko first. Sheryl stole it from you.
Thanks, Sheryl.
Yeah, exactly. So The Modern Seller, I love the name of the book. I love the title of the book. What prompted you to write The Modern Seller? And quite frankly, who is it for?
So if you are someone, so I'll answer the who is it for question first. So if you are someone who's in an individual selling role, you're a sales leader, or you're in sales enablement, sales training, as I was writing this book, I was picturing you and writing this book for you. So if you fall into any one of those categories, this is something that you can pick up and add to your toolkit. I think about The Modern Seller as really being a field guide. I think, Mario, you'll appreciate this. I'm not a theorist. I am super practical, and I've been in the trenches and in the role of somebody who is on quota and who has to achieve certain goals. So everything I write about is really from practical experience, practical application. But the big reason why I wanted to write The Modern Seller is that as I was doing my research, thinking about my everyday selling activities, the thing that I realized was missing, and you talk about how the modern buyer requires a modern seller. Our modern buyers are sitting in this kind of swirling chaos of business dynamics, technology trends, cultural change, and it is really changing the way that they're going about growing their businesses. And that means that their expectations of us are changing. We have to be different. We have to show up differently. It just cannot be the same old, same old. And as I was looking at what was out there, there are awesome resources on prospecting, presenting, negotiating, closing, all important selling skills. But my goal was to dig into what I like to call the skills behind the skills. There are some big skills or dimensions, as I call them, because there's so much more than skills that we need to be developing. And if we don't develop these dimensions, these skill sets, we are not going to be as successful as we could be. And to your point, that modern buyer will continue to get more sophisticated. We have to become more sophisticated along with that buyer. So that was really the catalyst behind it.
Now, you would agree, and I know you said who the book is for, but as sales leader, as well as the modern buyer has changed the game on us as sellers. And when I say the change the game is they have so much more information and data that's available to them to be able to make different types of decisions without salespeople helping, that truly the modern seller is applicable to the sales leader to help guide and shape their teams into the future, correct?
Absolutely. I'm thinking about my own selling experience. My success, I'm very individually motivated. I know you are. I know our listeners are. But in addition to that, the sales leader is one of the biggest difference makers. And especially that first line sales leader could be one of the most important roles in the sales organization, second to the person who is the individual seller. So the sales leader can absolutely benefit from not only developing them in these dimensions in their team, but in themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. The issue now really is how do you define modern selling or a modern seller? Because there's a lot of influencers that are out there. And one recently, a friend of mine who I disagreed with his commentary is Anthony Iannarino. And Anthony talked about that a modern seller is not someone who uses modern technology. It's someone who adds value to the sales process. And I would argue back with Anthony, that's not modern selling. Adding value to the sales process has always been part of selling. right? So there's a lot of people that are out there that have different definitions of modern selling. And I want to know, like, what is your definition of modern selling and or a modern seller?
Yep. So we might have some differences of opinion on this one. So I think about the modern seller as having three really distinct attributes. I agree with Anthony's point about the part that a modern seller is providing, they are a differentiator. They are recognized as a differentiator to their prospects and their clients' business. It is one thing for us to think of ourselves as differentiators, but we have to be recognized as differentiators, because if we're not, we are going to get passed by on the next opportunity. That's one element of a modern seller. The other element of a modern seller is that the value of the products or services that they sell really are, without them as part of the equation, they aren't as valuable. So if your product or service does not have you attached with it as a difference maker to the prospect or client, I'm not saying that you will never sell to that prospect or client, but you may not be as successful in the long run if you aren't part of that equation. And then to the technology piece of it, I purposefully did not touch on a lot of technology in this book because the technology changes so rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I took the tack of looking at kind of how do we need to tool up ourselves on the inside? How do we need to upgrade our operating systems, if you will, our internal operating systems, so that when we are using the technology, we are better at it. The technology is helping us. We aren't being ruled by it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that one. Yeah, and actually it was funny because on a previous podcast, we talked with Rod Hairston, who is the CEO of NASP, the National Association of Selling Professionals. Yeah. And he talked about, we were talking about the 12 steps to persuasion. And in that particular podcast, we talked about that you've got to have the level of certainty and belief that you will win and display physical expressions of that. And you've got to be able to really extend focus in the conversations and direct where people are going. And that to me has always been part of selling and part of what we would need to do. Mm-hmm. But even more important today, to your point, is being a differentiator, bringing value to the sales process. Totally would agree with you in terms of that particular element. But the one thing I would add on, and the one thing I'd love to get your opinion on is I believe that the modern seller is understanding the needs of today's buyer and is navigating on the same course that the buyer is on as well to help steer a little bit left, steer a little bit right, and get them in the direction that they want. And we always still need to bring value, and we do need to differentiate ourselves, but we meet the buyer on the course that they're on so that we can help them along that journey. And that's kind of the way I look at it as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you on that, because we are so conditioned to be thinking about our sales process or whatever our framework is, whatever you call it, whatever in your organization. It's really easy to let that dominate our thoughts versus taking the buyer, the decision maker's viewpoint and understanding where they are and matching ourselves up. And to your point, sometimes we have to be the ones to help navigate that process a little bit. And that is part of modern selling, because we cannot, we meet them where they are, but part of our power is helping to navigate with the intelligence that we have. There's tons of information out there, but sometimes there's not a lot of intelligence. And can we take all that information and turn it into something valuable, turn it into intelligence for our buyers so that they want to be working with us because they trust that we're going to navigate them in the right direction that is in the best interest of their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that end, for me, modern selling includes the technology piece to help add valuable intelligence, sales intelligence, right? Predictive intelligence, insights to what someone's doing. Let me give me an example and tell me what you think about this, Amy. Dreamforce is right around the corner. And I received an email from the senior business development rep of Jitterbit. Now, Jitterbit, I have no idea who they help, how they help, and what business problem they solve. And if I should know, then sorry to all my audience who is ashamed of me for not knowing because I still don't know.
Wait, there's only like 5,000 sales technology companies that are out there, right?
Yeah, exactly. But he sent me a note, and in this case, Willie is his name. And he says, it's that time of the year again. Dreamforce is fast approaching. So I wanted to invite you to Jitterbit's Dreamforce party booth in Trailhead Zone, Moscone Center. Okay. All right. Maybe if I was going to Dreamforce, that might be okay, which I am. I'm actually speaking over there this year. And then he says, as a reminder, Jitterbit is the go-to Salesforce integration platform for speed and simplicity. Okay. Now you lost me right there, because guess what? Nowhere in any documentation on any platform, in any predictive intelligence tool, even in LinkedIn's tool that allows you to be able to see what tools people are using, does it show that I'm using Salesforce.com?
Yep.
Because I'm not. We use HubSpot. So the fact that I got an email that was not hyper-personalized, that didn't have the intelligence, made me move that particular email into my folder that's called Emails That Suck.
I have a similar folder.
I have a folder for a keynote presentation for 2019 called Emails That Suck, to be able to highlight the challenge behind modern selling is that you are adding value, and adding value, in my opinion, is not personalizing or not using tools and technology to understand what that person is all about. Right. And if you don't have access to that, then at least you're speaking to my business problems. Like, talk to me about my business problems. What are your thoughts on that?
So I had a similar experience, and this actually came in through a LinkedIn message.
Oh,
it was I know.
It pains me.
I know, right?
They need our training.
Well, and I saved this one in my similar Emails That Suck folder, and I'm sure I'll be writing a blog post about it at some point. But it was an in-mail, and it was stating things that, to your point, had nothing to do with my business. It was something about Lotus Notes integration.
Oh God! Does Lotus Notes still exist?
Well, and here's where I did a little bit of investigation. So back in the day, back before I was at IBM, I was in IT, and I have in my profile that at one point in time I was a Lotus Notes enterprise administrator. So I have that back in my profile. My guess is that maybe someone had done a keyword search, found that, and then sent a fake personalized in-mail message to me, but that had nothing to do with what I do currently. And this was coming from a CEO of a small company. So my guess is that somebody sent that also on his behalf. So within like 10 seconds of reading this message, I knew it had nothing to do with me. It gets filed away into my Emails That Suck folder, and that person's credibility is ruined with me. So that's an example of where we have to be smart about how we're using our analytics, and we have to be smart with our intelligence and use it for good so that we maintain our credibility.
Yeah. So what's changed then over the course of time with respects to selling? You touched on a little bit earlier in the conversation about the buyer, but tell me what you think has changed.
Yeah. So I, in the research I've done, the conversations that I've had with my own clients, there are a couple of things that really stand out. One is what I like to call the world of sameness. We have so much choice these days. To our earlier conversation about information, I think it's almost cliche that we just kind of live on information overload. But what that means is we are constantly having to make decisions. And it means also that we are kind of living in this world of sameness. So I'll use myself as an example. I was doing some research for my own CRM tool, and I probably landed on, 3 or 4 that were, major industry players. And as I was looking at these tools, at their offerings, they were using almost identical messaging. They had very similar pricing structures, very similar features and benefits. And I'm looking at all this, I'm like, this could all work. I could probably pick any one of these and they would all work. And so what I did was I made no decision. I completely delayed the decision. And our decision makers are doing the same thing. When they're living in a world of sameness and we don't rise above and we are not different to them in a meaningful way, they're going to delay the decisions because we've not made the choice easy for them.
We've got to write a song about this. and it's called Living in a World of Sameness. So I love you just living in a world of sameness. I'm going to have to living in a world of sameness. We're going to have to figure it out. I'm going to have to get a jingle going on that one and put it on. I'll attribute it to you. But if you come up with a better song or some words to that, a chorus, a hook, you let me know. But that is so spot on living in a world of sameness that they do the same thing. And because, there's too much, it's information overflow, right? And there's too much available to them. And they're like, oh my God, what do I do? Right. So that's back to the whole point you mentioned earlier about a modern seller is one who provides differentiation and one who brings value.
Yep. And so that world of sameness thing is happening in, I don't care what industry you're in, it is happening everywhere. And you know what we need to do the next conference that we're at? We need to find one of those people that like do music improv on stage. You just put them on stage with their guitar. We give them a few lines and then they make up a whole song. I think we need to do that.
Living in a world of, we'll just tell them, here's the phrase, living in a world of sameness. Talk about it for the salespeople.
Yep.
I like that.
I think we need to make that happen.
A lot happens here on Selling with Social.
Right. We are solving all the world's problems around sameness.
So let's talk about some of the big trends that are influencing our prospects and clients. Tell me some of the things that you're seeing.
So besides the world of sameness, it's what I kind of jokingly refer to as the ROI speedway. So I'm sitting in this meeting. This was a few months ago. I'm with a regional president of a bank and her chief sales officer. So these are my decision makers. We are pretty far down the path to our earlier point about matching the selling and buying process. We are pretty far down the path on their buying process. We've had a number of meetings. We're working through different solutions. And I'm coming into this meeting. My plan is let's cross the T's and dot the I's and hopefully we can move forward, right? So we're sitting in this meeting. We're reviewing different things. And all of a sudden, my regional bank president, she gets really quiet. And, she kind of gets that look on her face, like the wheels are turning and I'm about to be asked something significant. So I'm sitting there, I'm waiting for her to ask me what's on her mind. And she's like, Amy, she's like, I've just been thinking through all this. And she's like, I need to know what our ROI is going to be on this solution. I need to be able to go to my CEO and I need to be able to bullet point out 2 or 3 bullet points on how this is going to change my business in the next 90 days. And that was the number, 90 days.
All right.
And so the lesson for me in that is our clients, our prospects, they are not working on an annual business. They are in a quarterly business and sometimes even in a monthly business. And if we can't demonstrate very specific ROI, how we're going to help them solve a business problem or meaningful ROI in their business in 90 days or less, we're going to get stuck in their buying process and in our selling process. That was a real wake-up moment for me, for someone who prides herself on being able to differentiate. And I think I'm doing this the whole time, but obviously I wasn't. And I had to go back to the drawing board and make sure I could really differentiate and help her do it for her CEO. Yeah,
that's a really great point. On a trend is the 90-day quarterly ROI that people are looking for, or at least a major milestone that showcases we're in the right direction.
Right. And the lesson for me was being really crystal clear on what those expectations are. Mm-hmm. Our clients are getting more sophisticated with ROI expectations. And so we need to become more sophisticated too. And we need to be able to really understand what are your top 1 or 2 needle movers. And every selling conversation, every conversation needs to be centered around that if we're going to be a difference maker.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great, and I love the next one, ROI Speedway. Okay, so we've got living in a world of sameness. All right, we got that, and we got ROI Speedway. God, I'm taking some good stuff. I love this.
We're gonna have a whole song written out here. There's gonna be just like every one of those is gonna be its own verse.
You can't live in a world of sameness on the ROI Speedway.
All right, so see what you can do with this one. How about invisible competition?
Oh,
so think about that one.
I'm gonna have to add that in later on in the show here.
Okay, all right. Well,
all right. So we'll get that one. But so do me a favor. In the book, you talk about 5 dimensions that modern sellers need to cultivate.
Yep.
Walk us through what these 5 dimensions are.
Yeah. So as I was talking about earlier, I really think about the journey, the modern seller's journey is kind of upgrading our own internal operating system. And so there are these 5 dimensions, and I call them dimensions because I feel like there's so much more than skill sets. I've heard you talk quite a bit about mindset, skill sets, tool sets. So they're just much more encompassing than just building skills. So the 5 that rise above all the rest, a modern seller is agile. A modern seller is entrepreneurial. They are holistic. they are social, and they are an ambassador. So those are the big 5 dimensions, and they are these kind of skills behind the skills. And they are the dimensions we need to be building to help us get better at leveraging technology, leveraging our intelligence to help us be more effective and efficient in what we're doing every day. We have to amplify our sales activities if we're going to amplify our results. So these are the 5 kind of working behind the scenes that if you build these, even if you build one, you'll see positive effects in the others to help you be better at what you're doing every day.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I want to drill down into one of these, but I'm sure you've got one of them that you want to drill down into. But you've piqued my curiosity on the holistic one.
Okay.
So I don't know which one you want to drill down to, but if you don't have a preference, what does holistic mean?
No, let's start there. No, that's great. Let's start with holistic. So as I was thinking about holistic and I was doing my research and putting together these dimensions, a lot of the research that I had done on holistic was, from a selling perspective, was a holistic approach to account management, to a holistic approach to like methodologies, frameworks, account management, which are all really important. The angle that I took was focusing on the seller as a person, and that we are one of the most important parts of this equation. And to kind of borrow what we were talking about earlier, navigating our buyers through the process. So the idea here is that in any given day, we have what I call the non-renewables. We have a non-renewable amount of time, energy, motivation, and discipline on any given day. And the choices that we make about how we invest those resources directly impacts the results, our sales results. So that is kind of, it's strategic productivity is the mindset behind being holistic.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Any of the other ones that you wanted to touch on? Agile, entrepreneur. I love the entrepreneurial one because I totally agree with you on that one. And we can probably spend a lot of time on that one. But ambassador and social, and of course, naturally, I want to touch on social. But we can talk about another topic besides that one because we could spend all day on that one.
So the one that I usually get asked the most questions about is the ambassador piece. It's the one that it's like, tell me more about that one. I'm not quite sure what that one is. So think of an ambassador like a bridge. In a global sense, an ambassador is someone who is a bridge between countries and cultures. In modern selling, an ambassador is someone who is also a bridge between themselves and their company, between themselves and their prospects and their clients, their community, their industry. They function as a bridge between all of these different entities and kind of connect them together. There are 2 things that make an ambassador really unique. One is the ability to really embody the values of your organization. And this is where it's really important to be working for an organization where you are aligned with their values and you really believe in that organization and what you're selling. If you're in a spot where you're not, this is tough to do. But embodying the values of your organization, and at the same time, I think this also speaks to social, kind of rising above the rest with your unique thought leadership, your unique brand, what makes you, you, in combining those things together. Ambassadors do that really well. And then the other thing that ambassadors do really well is they have this great ability to take a kernel of a client win, even the smallest client win, and use it as a springboard to creating lifetime value, lifetime loyalty, really. They're seeing further down the road to how they can really build out the client relationship and create value for them, for the client, for themselves, and for their organization. So those are things that really make an ambassador rise up above the others.
Yeah. And I want to come back to this concept of being an ambassador and who can be an ambassador. And oftentimes we talk about the seller, but really I want to touch on the sales leader on this topic of ambassador. But before we do that, I want everybody to listen in to this message from our program sponsor.
Vengreso is proud to be a partner with Frost & Sullivan on the 2nd annual STAR Executive Mind Exchange Sales Event. Join us at STAR, February 11th through the 13th, 2019 in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, to mix and mingle with forward-thinking sales executives and thought leaders. Vengreso will be leading an interactive session on how to stand out and excel with video to drive more sales. As an event partner, we're excited to extend a $250 savings to all registrants. Simply visit frost.com/Vengreso and use the discount code MARIO at registration. That's www.frost.com/Vengreso, VENGRESO, and use the discount code MARIO.
So before that break, we were talking about the 5 dimensions of the modern seller, and you mentioned ambassador, and you described what that meant on becoming an ambassador. Let's talk about it in the context of a sales leader.
Yeah.
How does a sales leader become an ambassador of the brand, or an ambassador of the culture, or an ambassador of their own personal thought leadership? Or is it an ambassador of what? Is it all the above, all the things I just mentioned? More than that? Well, you tell me.
Yeah. So like we were talking about before, the sales leader, I think, has one of the toughest roles in the organization, because they are managing and leading so many things. They have their team to manage and lead, and they could have a team of I think the average sales team is like 10 people. So you have responsibility for leading your sales team. You are doing blocking and tackling for your sales team across your entire organization. You're managing up, you're dealing with all kinds of client relationships. It is a tough job. But to answer your question, the sales leader is that ambassador for their team. So they are representing their team within the organization, but they are also responsible for building their own thought leadership. They can't ignore their own thought leadership at the expense of the other things that they have going on in leading their team.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, and you think about it from this perspective, Amy, to your lines of social, which we didn't touch on, but I'm sure I know exactly where you're going with that. And I didn't get to that part in the book. I'm sorry. I didn't yet, but I'll get to it. I'll get to it.
All right. You promised.
I promise. Pinky swear. But if you think about this, when we are bringing on new talent into the sales organization as leaders, one of the things that we're looking for is are they the right fit? Do they fit with the mindset of the team? Can they help contribute? Do they have a skill that I'm missing? Can they add to the skill set I'm trying to create, as well as the culture I'm trying to create? But here's the number one missing thing that I believe most sales leaders have not thought about and are not doing. That is, you're looking for the person that is the right culture fit for your team, whether that's through skill or whether that's through personality. But how do they know what is the culture fit if you're not talking about it, if you're not sharing it, if you're not displaying that, if you're not bringing video content, if you're not even your own LinkedIn profile, for God's sakes, doesn't even have any recommendations that people talk about? And for example, if you look at mine, there's 100 and whatever it is, 30 recommendations on there, 75 of which are people that have worked with me, for me, or reported directly to me, right? And they'll talk to you about Mario's style, extremely direct, right? And when it comes to business, extremely direct. But I have a very, very keen focus in terms of helping you get to where you want to get to and driving that extreme loyalty, right? That's what you'll see from mine. People know that when they come and work for me, but how do people know that about you, Mr. Sales Leader or Mrs. Sales Leader, in terms of the culture that you're trying to bring? And I believe this is a big miss in terms of being an ambassador. An ambassador is an ambassador of the company's brand, an ambassador of the culture, an ambassador of your environment, of the environment specifically that you created for your particular team, whether it's a one sales team or you're a director and you have 5 sales teams, or you're a vice president, you have a region, or you're a chief sales officer and you have a country, as an example. What are your thoughts on that?
My thought on that is I have seen plenty of sales leaders who do not have that kind of culture building strategy when they're going to hire, or even as they're continuing on in their path. I think one of the things I also see is that culture can differ from team to team. If you've ever been in a scenario where you have, you're an individual rep and your territories get swizzled around. So one year you're sitting in the same territory, you're selling to the same clients, but now you have a different leader. And your leader before did all the things that you just described. And now you're on a team where that leader doesn't do any of those things. And you might as well be working for a different company at that point.
Yeah.
That is a mismatch internally of creating the right sales culture. And I see that so often. And I don't know the statistics on this, but just anecdotally speaking, people are getting new leaders probably every 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
Especially in large organizations. So to add on to what you're saying, I see a big miss in consistency of sales culture between leaders, and it's not being reinforced from the top down.
I think the number that I saw was the average tenure of a sales leader, a VP, chief sales officer type of leader, is 22 months at an organization.
Sense. Yeah,
don't quote me. I was watching Ernst & Young presentation that they were giving, and that was what they had quoted in terms of the seat. I think that's what they quoted. But nonetheless, exactly correct. And I was on another podcast with Juliana Stancampiano. She talked about how working inside of with sales enablement professionals, working inside of an organization, you can go from the 3rd floor to the 4th floor and have a totally different company.
Totally.
So it's interesting how leaders need to think through this holistic approach to becoming an ambassador using social. Man, I thought I could get all 5 of them in, but
we're going to get it before the end.
Almost, I got 3 out of 5. Okay, all right. I got 3 out of your 5 dimensions. But using a holistic approach to thinking about how to drive. How do I make people want to work with us, for us, right? And that's what I always told people when I used to interview sales folks for the team. There are 2 things that you get to choose. 1, you get to choose the company you're going to work for.
Mm-hmm.
2, you get to choose who you're going to work for. So choose wisely, right? But it's difficult when leaders themselves, you can't even understand what their personality is like, what culture do they display, those types of things. So I think that's super important as a modern leader, a modern sales leader. These are some of the elements that I think are important to personify. All right. Any other thoughts there you had on that topic?
No, I think we covered quite a bit on that topic. And for people out there, for our listeners who are in a sales leadership role, this is something as you're looking at your sales teams, kind of evaluating, am I being an ambassador for my team? Am I the person that my team wants to work for? It's not easy, but it can be as simple as talking to each person individually and understanding where you stand with them, which is kind of a vulnerable thing to do. But if you're willing to do it, boy, you can build a lot of loyalty. And that's a hallmark of an ambassador, building loyalty. Imagine if you had your entire team really had that fierce loyalty to you. They're going to go all out in being able to help you achieve your goals as a sales leader in addition to their own goals. So it's worth pursuing, even if it can be a little bit tough and uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time here, and I've loved our conversation. I feel like nobody really knows this, but Amy and I actually have our glass of Chardonnay. That's this nice, beautiful, crystal clear glass that you can see all the way through. That looks just like water, but
surprisingly like water.
It tastes like water. My gosh, it tastes so delicious. But before we go, you obviously work with sales enablement leaders quite significantly. What is a strategy or 2 that you can recommend for sales enablement to help them, quite frankly, better support sales organizations?
Yeah. So having a training background and running a training business for the last 12 years, one of the conversations we're always having and still having is about how do training leaders make sure that they are creating business value and getting the seat at the table with business leaders. I think about the same conversation with sales enablement professionals is we need to be continually looking at how can we always be adding value to what the most important priorities are in the business, and how do we continue to have our voice with the C-level, with senior leadership. So a couple of ideas. One is really it might seem small, but it's a relationship builder with your individual contributors. If you are in a position in a sales enablement role where you can take something off of a seller's plate, give them one less thing to do, one less thing to worry about, you will be their hero. So if there's something that you can do to make their life easier, that's one of my recommendations. My other recommendation is really get to know what your sellers are doing in the business. Go on calls, interview, just understand what they're selling, what their challenges are, how they can be more successful, what they need from you to be more successful. Because when you know that and then you start to deliver on that, you build credibility and you're contributing to the business.
And there you have it. Words of wisdom spoken by my friend, Amy Franko. Amy, how do we order your book? Can we get it off Amazon under the Modern Seller?
Yep. So going out to Amazon, and you can also go directly through my website, amyfranko.com.
So we'll make sure for all of you listening in that we put in a link into the show notes for ordering the book off of Amazon along with amyfranko.com. But before we go, Amy, all-time favorite movie, what is it?
All right. So you are asking this question of someone who doesn't watch a lot of movies, which people, our listeners are probably like, what? But still, here's my all-time favorite. It was one of the very first movies I ever saw in a movie theater. I was front row for Back to the Future.
Back to the Future.
That's what I'm going with.
I thought you were going to say E.T. Like when you and I were kids, it was like E.T. I cried. My dad had to take me out of the movie theater in that movie.
That was another one I saw in the theater. So yes. Yep, absolutely.
It was horrible. That movie. I loved it. I of course I watched it later on, but it made me cry. And I remember my dad taking me out of the theater. He was like, "What's wrong?" And I was bawling when E.T. died.
Aww.
All right. Fair enough. Listen, everyone. Thank you, Amy, for joining. It's been fabulous. If someone wants to connect with you, should they do that on LinkedIn, on Twitter? How do they connect with you?
Oh, first of all, thank you. This has been such a fun conversation, and I'm excited to have our new hit song coming out here in the near future. But the best way to connect with me is LinkedIn, Amy Franko on LinkedIn, and on Twitter, also Amy Franko.
Fantastic. And for all of you listening in right now, thanks so much for joining us. You listen in to this message right here. Thanks so much for joining me on that episode of Selling with Social. I hope you found as much value in that episode as I did. Here's what I want you to do next. Please go to www.vengreso.com. That's VENGRESO.com. VENGRESO.com. And make sure that you get access to our content. We've got the latest and greatest in digital sales, sales training, content marketing, and social selling strategies that are going to help you grow your sales pipeline. I look forward to having you on the next show of Selling with Social. Make sure you also go to vengreso.com/podcast to be able to get access to the latest and greatest Selling with Social episodes, along with any of the other episodes that we've got from Social Business Engines with my friend and partner, Bernie Borges. Thanks again for joining on Selling with Social.
Did you register yet for the STAR event? STAR is a Frost & Sullivan Executive Mind Exchange event for sales leaders taking place February 11th through the 13th, 2019 in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. Make sure you register for the event at frost.com/Vengreso and use the discount code MARIO at registration for a $250 savings.